Today we're doing a bit of an ultimate showdown. We are pitting Winsor and Newton's 3 watercolor brands. We have here Winsor and Newton Professional, and these are from tube. We have Winsor and Newton Cotman, and we have Winsor and Newton Reeves. Yeah, I bet y'all didn't know that Winsor and Newton made Reeves. So you guys can check out my other reviews for Winsor and Newton Professional as well as Winsor and Newton Cotman products here on this channel, although I do believe that some of the Cotman competition is patrons only. So you're gonna have to join the art nerd community to get the full scoop. We are also taking a look at this somewhat dated because they have changed the packaging Reeves set. And this is, I believe, like the deluxe set, so it comes with stuff that I'm not gonna use because I just don't care. I am gonna be using the watercolors though for this little showdown. Are y'all ready? I am so ready. Let's go ahead and get started. So for the purposes of this showdown, let's see, we have 12. I think I can do all 12. We're gonna do all 12. Actually, we have 14. I'm gonna try. I'm not gonna make any promises, but I'm gonna try to do all of them. We are going to begin with our Winsor and Newton dried from tubes. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to swatch in time lapse and we're gonna talk about it after. While that dries, we're gonna go ahead and move on to Cotman. I'm saving my thoughts and the price breakdown for the end, and I'm gonna do Cotman a solid. I'm actually going to pre-activate these half pans. Cotman needs a little love. Gonna go ahead and get swatching. I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the Winsor and Newton tube paints. Now for the purposes of comparison, I mixed up the order quite a bit, mostly so that I could kind of line colors up underneath the colors they're supposed to be. So for example, and I'm gonna go over all the colors at the end. I lined up my burnt umbers, I lined up my yellow ochres, I lined up my sap greens. This is a cerulean blue. It's underneath like Winsor Blue green shade. It probably should have been under Winsor Blue red shade. I lined up my French ultramarines, etc. Finally, we're going to be swatching our Reeves colors, and I'm going to try to line them up the same way I lined these up, which means I'm going to be doing a little bit of resorting. Now, there are 14 colors here, and this set has 12, and then my little homemade set has 11. So it's not going to be perfect, but I'm gonna go ahead and line them out first so I can kind of figure out what I'm doing and then go from there. As my Reeves samples dry, I'm just going to go ahead and reapply for my Masstone Swatches. And it's just so that I can get the most saturated color possible. Since I'm working in kind of a tight space, sometimes the colors have a tendency to blend into one another. I'm going to do this for all the brands I'm testing, so at least this will be consistent throughout. And I just wanted to disclose this so that you guys wouldn't assume these colors were, you know, this saturated on just one layer. I'm going to put in a little plug here and say that if you guys want to see a grown woman torture herself, you can head on over to my Patreon, because I am going to do a field test with the Reeves, and that's going to be a patron exclusive because I'm sure there might be a little bit of cursing involved. So if you'd like to see a grown woman cry, that might be your opportunity to do so. I'm also kind of tempted to do a 3-way field test using the same image for the Winsor Newton Professional, the Cotman, and for the Reeves, and that is also going to be backer exclusive because there's probably going to be tears involved. So if you enjoy what I do and you want to help make it continue and you want to gain a little early access / backer exclusive content, you're just going to have to head on over to patreon.com/NatoSoup to join the Art Nerd community. So I have collected pigment information on everything but the Reeves. That is actually quite difficult to find online. So I went ahead and I tweeted to ColArt, who's the parent company of Winsor, Newton, Cotman, and Reeves, for the pigment information. So let's see if they get back to me. I've written into Winsor Newton before and I've never really been satisfied with their answers. So fingers crossed that they can give me some pigment information on Reeves so we can do a fair comparison. But I just wanted to let you guys know that I couldn't find it online, even though I kind of dug around for it, and had to write into Reeves, so fingers crossed. So ColArt's never got back to me on Twitter, so I ended up sending them an email, and this is the response I got. Hi Becca, thank you for your interest in Reeves. I'm sorry, but I don't have a listing of the pigments in the Reeves watercolors. Because Reeves is an introductory range, we don't produce the same materials as we would for higher level ranges. This allows us to pass the savings on to the consumer. And then they signed it, of course. So this tells me one of two things. One, we're looking at dyes here because dyes are a little more inexpensive than most pigments. Two, we're probably looking at a lot of optical brighteners, which should surprise no one who is familiar with Reeves watercolors or just inexpensive watercolors in general. Three, we're looking at a lot of hues and a lot of inexpensive replacement pigments and possibly dyes. So we have one of three or a combination of the three options for the Reeves watercolor paints, but unfortunately I can't give you pigment info for them because I don't have pigment info for them. I can give you pigment info for Winsor Newton and for Cotman. There are a lot of hues in the Cotman line. There are also a lot of colors that are made up of multiple pigments. In fact, let us count our single pigments. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so about half are single pigment paints. Whereas in this lineup, which I did assemble myself, but I didn't assemble it for just single pigment paints, we have, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So 1/2 versus 3/4. Let's see. We also only have a few pigments in common. Ultramarine is the same as French, or the same pigment as French ultramarine. Cobalt blue hue is the same pigment as ultramarine with the addition of Chinese white or whatever they're using for Chinese white. Yellow ochre, they're only one pigment number off, with Cotman's yellow ochre being PY42 and Winsor Newton's being PY43. If you like a deeper, richer color, the Cotman one might be the one for you. The burnt umbers actually differ. The Cotman is a 2-pigment burnt umber with PY42 and PBR7, whereas Winsor Newton's is PBR7, PR101, and PY47. And then their burnt sienna actually has more in common color-wise with the burnt umber from Winsor and Newton. It's just PR101, which is one of the pigments that constitutes the Winsor and Newton burnt umber. The yellows differ fairly drastically. This is not a Scarlet Lake, it's actually a cadmium red pale hue, so it's kind of a vermilion-y color. Their Alizarin Crimson is PR206, whereas the Alizarin Crimson from the Winsor Newton range is PR83. And I don't have a Viridian in here, so I can't compare it with the Viridian hue, which is PG7. And like I said, we can't talk pigments when it comes to Reeves because we just don't have any. And I have here a sample from my upcoming backer exclusive video where I put Reeves watercolors in half bands and swatch them, and we see how they perform. So if that sounds interesting to you, you should definitely consider becoming an art nerd. So the last thing to do is to talk prices and to do a lift test. So we're gonna do the lift test and then we're gonna talk prices. So originally in my notes for Reeves, I said I wasn't going to dry those out. Of course, I am a glutton for punishment, but for this test, I did not dry them out because I wanted to give them the best chance at a good performance. So the permanence is labeled, but the color names differ from what I'm commonly used to for watercolors and from the other ColArts family members. And pigments aren't listed, and despite writing in, I never really got a solid answer. And that's kind of in keeping with my experiences with writing to Winsor and Newton, so I'm not even going to push it because they often will just not even respond to me. So there's a lot of gross, very dark yellow gum arabic at the top of those tubes. You guys saw me kind of trying to expel that. And some of the colors are difficult to mix with water. They get really clumpy, like this yellow just got soapy and clumpy. It was hard to use. Some colors appear milky or chalky. The violet for sure, the sap green as well as brilliant red. Colors are very saturated on paper and mix readily, and Reeves seems to take a really long time to draw. In fact, it took longer than the other two ColArts family members. Again, so pigment information is not listed on any of the Reeves sites, and then I tweeted them. I didn't get a response, so I emailed them. I think that brings us up to speed with everything I have swatched for today's review. So we're gonna do the lifting test, and that's pretty simple. I'm gonna use a not overly stiff bristle. This is not a scrub brush. This is just a flat shader synthetic, but I like using it for lifting because I feel like it provides just the right amount of scrubbing without being abrasive. And I'm gonna use a clean cup of water and a paper towel, and then I'm gonna mark off where I tried to lift. Okay, so in a twist that probably surprises very few people, I found that the Reeves watercolors were the most prone to lifting, followed by the Cotman, which are still fairly prone to lifting, followed by the Winsor and Newton, where you can do some lifting, but it's not quite as apparent. Now, this can be a good thing and this can be a bad thing. Lifting can be great if you want to correct a mistake, if a little watercolor has gotten out of line, or if you want to lighten up an area. Lifting can be bad when you're trying to paint glazes and layers, and you're finding that your colors are muddy or desaturated. So it can really go either way, and it's kind of a preference thing. But for those of you who are really struggling with watercolor and you're using Reeves, this could be one of the reasons why you're struggling. So finally, we're gonna talk prices, and we're gonna start with our Reeves. So online, prices do vary from, let me grab the Dick Blick listing really quick. So we are working with a 14 color tube set actually. So my price varies between the two, but for a 10 milliliter 12 tube set on Dick Blick, you can pay $7.11, or for an 18 tube set with the same size tubes, you can pay $10.38. On Amazon, a 18 color set will be $13.96, and I have links for all of that for you guys. For the Cotman Field Plush Travel Set, which is the set I have right here, it's in a newer form on their site, but it's the same set. It is $38.89 on Dick Blick, and you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 colors. And then for this self-assembled set, which was assembled from tubes and part of another review, I'm going to go by the individual prices of the tubes, and then we're going to talk total. So these are for 5 milliliter tubes. They will refill these half pans at least twice. $5.81 for Winsor Yellow, $5.81 for Transparent Yellow, $6.53 for Scarlet Lake, $5.81 for Alizarin Crimson, $6.53 for Ultramarine Blue, $5.81 for Winsor Blue, Blue Shade, $5.81 for Winsor Blue Green Shade, $5.81 for Sap Green, $5.81 for Yellow Ochre, $5.81 for Burnt Umber, and $5.81 for Ivory Black. So our total for the Winsor and Newton is $65.35, and it's not quite an apt comparison. This is a set I assembled. These are tube watercolors. I did, of course, put them in a very expensive Altoids tin with some very expensive half pans that I got from Amazon. Just kidding. They're actually both very cheap, of course. But it's not quite an apt comparison. You can definitely get pre-made Winsor and Newton half pans. I actually find that these are a little bit more expensive, and I actually have a comparative review of the from tube versus the half pan to help you decide which one is right for you. But even with this, I just kind of assembled my own set based on basic mixing colors because I didn't want to have to purchase a set to review. So it's not quite the most apt comparison, but it should definitely give you guys an idea of how these paints handle and the performance levels for these paints. I am going to be doing 3 field tests, and I'm going to be sharing those with my patrons. So if you're interested in seeing how they perform in a head-to-head competition, make sure you head on over to patreon.com/NattoSoup and join the Art Nerd community so you can gain access to that. And they will have that early access. So before you guys even see this video, they will probably have that video. So I recommend you search for like Winsor and Newton or Reeves, something like that. All right, so thank you guys so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, useful, and informative for you guys. Hopefully it opened your eyes. If you're doing very simple things, Reeves should be fine. But if you want to do something more layered or more complex, I really recommend you go with Cotman or with Winsor Newton. And if you're going to be painting big comic pages with multiple layers or highly detailed illustrations of these 3, I recommend you guys check out Winsor Newton. I am also working on kind of a tournament style stat sheet of which brand is, in my opinion, the best brand. So if you're holding out on buying your watercolors to see which one wins, I highly recommend you keep an eye out for that. I will probably share that with my wonderful art nerds as well as a thank you for their years of support. So thank you guys so much for watching. I will see you